And we're live.
Cool.
Awesome. Everything worked.
Perfect.
First time ever, and everything works out of the box.
Sweet. Crossing
So
my fingers worked.
Yeah.
yeah, let's see for how long. So let's open up. Welcome to the not first Terramate office hour ever. I think it's the second or third one. We ran office hours before. But it's definitely the first one of 2024 and 2024. And we we look forward to run this every 2 weeks from now on and invite guests and basically discuss yeah, exciting topics in the industry. So my name is Sören. I'm happen to be one of the co-founders of Terramate. I'm also pretty heavily invested in infrastructure as code. So what is Terramate? Terramate is an infrastructure as code, collaboration, visibility, and observability platform. And with me here today is Selina, who works with me on the company, and then also Matt, who's been long-term friend of mine and happens to be the CEO of Masterpoint. So maybe Matt, you just take it from here and introduce yourself quick.
Cool. Yeah. Glad to be here. Yeah, I'm the CEO of Masterpoint. We're a small boutique consulting firm. We primarily focus on doing infrastructure as code via Terraform for AWS clients, and really helping them deal less with their cloud and help them focus more on their application than on their cloud. So, yeah, but nice to be here. Happy to chat.
Awesome. Yeah, and good to have you here too. And so what are some of the technologies that you guys are using over at Masterpoints, whenever you work in client-facing projects?
Yeah, I think the way that I've always described it to people as like a first pass is that we have a pretty specific tech stack around AWS, where that's like our subject matter expertise. Terraform is I always say it's our bread and butter. I think like that's how we actually operationalize and make things happen. And then we go with containerized environments because working within containerized environments, containers is just the best way to ship applications today, whether that's Lambdas or ECS or Kubernetes. Uh, and yeah, I think that's the high level. Yeah, like I said, the deeper level is we're really big on Terraform, automating Terraform, so everything's on Rails, uh, doing the best practices. We use Atmos a lot of the time for projects. I have members of my team who have used TerraGrunt in the past a bunch. We have used Spacelift. We've run Atlantis for clients. We're excited about, using Terramate in a future project for sure, both, the actual framework and tool and the product when we get into the beta. And yeah, that's kind of our general thought process. I think there's like 15 different tools I could, name off, but the big ones are right there.
Yeah, it's interesting. It just got so crowded in the whole infrastructure as code, tooling space. So actual infrastructure as code vendors, Terraform, now OpenTofu, Pulumni, then the more cloud specific vendors, CloudFormation, CDK, um, and whatnot. And I feel it's like if you look at the market, it, my guess is after reading the last GitHub Octoverse, saying that HCL is still one of the fastest growing languages on GitHub, that Terraform still owns somewhat 80% of the market. Um, and also too, it takes technology a certain time to get adapted. So if you look at this Gartner hype cycle, then Terraform is pretty mature already, and then there's a few challenges on the horizon. And I'd be interested in learning and hearing more about your opinion. If you look at the state of the infrastructure as code market, and we have all those different vendors, and we can go into this whole open tofu versus Terraform discussion in a bit too. But then, do you think, and based on what you see by working on, client facing projects, that there's more sort of a fragmentation in the market that people tend to explore new technologies and actually adopt more new technologies? Or do you still see, maybe also due to the nature that you're in Terraform shop or mostly in Terraform shop, do you still see that most of the people, they may look left and right, but they're still very heavily invested into in Terraform?
I've seen a mix of both. It's interesting because I think that now with the license change, like the HashiCorp BSL license change, I think that there's a lot of like feeling of fear for bigger companies where they don't want to be, on a tool, so they're evaluating their options. And I have heard of people saying, "Hey, we're going to make the full switch into Pulumi," or that's probably what I've heard the most. But I've heard a lot of people just say, "Hey, we're going to see what happens as Tofu gets more stable and gets like legs under it and actually proves itself." And uh I think that's the thing that, there's kind of a split there, right?
Right.
I'm not seeing anybody, talk about the really new up and comers like Wing Lang or, Nick Trick. Like there's a few companies that are doing totally different things that are very new that feel like they're at the very like step one phase. And yeah, Terraform is still king because it has the module library, it's very stable. There's, good features that have come just even in the past 6 months. Tofu is gonna, be able to match that is what, I've seen from what they've done so far. And, I think we'll see some interesting things, but I haven't seen anybody like I haven't seen the market go all in on one direction. I've seen people just be a little bit afraid, and they're kind of like, we're gonna hold off for a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, and it sort of matches what I see too. What I find interesting though is an observation that since the license change, I think that HashiCorp is putting a lot more of an effort into the CLI as well as the cloud offering. So they just, released this
Yeah,
Workspace Explorer to understand what sort of module versions you use in workspaces and to more have an, overview of what's really going on in your organization. And then also to, there's Terraform stacks now coming up and just a bunch of new functionality that they added to tests. And it just feels that for maybe a year or two, or that may be just my, gut feeling by looking at the product updates and stuff, but for a year or two, they haven't really been innovating. And if I look at companies that have been clearly at the forefront, then I would say Pulumi has done a really good job, going into the different categories, looking how to incorporate AI and stuff. The one thing that I need to say though is that I think the community and variety of options when it comes to tooling, quick pass in the sense of just use this module, whether it's like Antons or Cloud Posses or whatnot. It's just such a rich ecosystem that um, for me, I would always hesitate to move to another vendor. And then also to the question by the end of the day still, what's the real impact for an end user now that HashiCorp changed its license, right? Like if you were to run Terraform on your end and you're an end user, you're actually not affected, right? So the
yeah,
ecosystem is affected. Um, but the ones that are mostly affected are, of course, companies that directly or also indirectly, to be frank, compete with HashiCorp because it was somewhat not that clear. They made it a lot more clear now, but it was somewhat not that clear, where to draw the line. But yeah, I think the bottom line here is that it will lead to higher fragmentation. So now here's this thing, and I would like to get your feedback on that. Um, so my guess is, by looking at the market, I think the ops-centric shops will stay on Terraform or turn it. It's OpenTofu is an alternative. The dev-centric, more sort of, oh, we want to incorporate platform engineering methodologies, etc., kind of shops. They're probably, you know look for options due to the reason, not so much due to the reason that the license has changed, but due to the reason that maybe HCL is not optimal for developers, right? At least developers prefer to manage infrastructure in their own language. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Um, I'd love to say that like CDK TF was like better and that would be like a path for that type of like thought process. Um, I definitely see the more dev-centered folks, the people who are actually, they're more application engineers, but they, know how to build infrastructure. So they're finding the line between both. They're the ones who are really interested in CDK, or they're really interested in Pulumi, or the, use your application code language as your infrastructure as code language. Um, I don't know. I still feel like if you're a platform team and you're going to go with Pulumi, you run into this issue of, okay, now your platform engineers need to know the same language like TypeScript or Golang, and they need to write, pretty heavy amount of that for their application engineers to then use the still abstracted, module or whatever. So it makes it easy for the, application engineers who are self-servicing that. But I think that's like a high barrier. Like a lot of platform engineers today are not really application engineers. There's so many people who are not coming from an application engineering background. And I think that could be a recipe to just like kind of slow down. Like you just end up, having things not move as quickly. Whereas the great thing about Terraform is that it's not as complex, right? It's not a full application and like regular programming language. It is more declarative, even though it has some dynamic elements. And that kind of keeps complexity low. And you can use the really built out open source ecosystem that we've talked about. And I
Yeah.
think that people that make the jump to think, hey, we'll just use Pulumi because it's going to it's going to be great for everybody. I think that they're actually going to run into a bunch of problems. And I have a big problem with the whole imperative uh, language, both CDK and Pulumi being imperative, and the fact that they did this whole bring your own language thing means that their community is just separated as a step, step one. Whether you're using TypeScript, you're not going to be able to, or you're able to use, Python modules, but is that a smart thing for your organization to do? Like if your whole organization is writing TypeScript, but you go out and you find an awesome Pulumi module that's written in Python, is it smart for you to start using that within your TypeScript code? Because you can, it's possible. They've done good engineering practice, like some interesting things to make that possible. But are you then going to end up having to read Python as a TypeScript engineer? And is that going to end up burning you? Burning your organization because you're tracking down a bug, or you have to add a feature to some open source thing that is outside of your language of, you know, of what you're used to, and it kind of like breaks your flow. And that's one of the biggest things I have against the, imperative language infrastructure as code tools, is because I just think by being multi-language, you can easily shoot yourself in the foot pretty badly. And I think it just breaks up the community. Anyway, I think I could
Yeah.
talk about that for a while.
I mean, it's a good point, and if if I was to take a budget decision that motivates me to buy into a technology that's pretty standardized and it's a, wide and open, pretty well adapted, pretty well tested ecosystem versus I get into something early and I may have more options and some of those may be developer friendly, then, I'd always debate whether the complexity I onboard here is actually worth it. And then also two, the other question is, of course, and that's more, that's more the core sense of this conversation, I guess. Should developers really manage infrastructure in the first place?
Yeah.
Um, or should people that, don't have a background and they don't know the potential damage that can be done? Because I think I posted this a couple of days ago on LinkedIn, infrastructure is annoying by nature and also complex
Mhm.
by nature. And we see a lot of companies trying to build abstraction layers on top of it. I mean, it's somewhat of an use case that we see in Terramate CLI too. Like people use code generation and service catalog modules and whatnot to basically provide, opinionated, pre-configured APIs, nothing else. It's just an API, whether it's a module on UI, to the users, to make this more accessible, right? So they don't rely on ops. And so to sum up this epic monologue, what I would like to learn is, so if you look at, how you guys work and then your experience by looking at the market, is this actually a common pattern that, there's more awareness within organization that, they want to reduce this cognitive load from developers and make infrastructure and many other things more accessible and, kind of democratize it? Or how do you feel about this?
Yeah, I think it's definitely something that people want to do. I don't think a lot of people are there yet, of course. It's such a uh it feels like the idea of platform engineering is still pretty new, and like that idea of like the ideal thing that you're getting at, which is like developer self-service. It feels like not a lot of people have actually reached that, at least at a high level. Like maybe they have a few things that can be self-service. But the question of whether application engineers actually should be able to, I think they should. It's because it's just that you need somebody to have governance so that they don't create, you know, 50 functions, or they make the architectural uh blunder that ends up making everybody unhappy 6 months later. I think that what I like our solution to that is really to think about it from a GitOps perspective, where, hey, everything is self-service, but it all flows through Git. And because it flows through Git, we can put an approver on a PR, and the application engineers can self-service. The platform engineers can approve that PR that says, hey, we're going to be spinning up a new Lambda. We're going to be spinning up a new S3 bucket, a new Kubernetes cluster, whatever it is. And that actually enables, there's some checks and balances, right? Like the platform engineers build the abstracted code. Application engineers can submit some consume that abstracted code, that module, to build the thing they need.
Yeah.
And then the platform engineers can say, yeah, that looks good. Good idea. Cool.
Yeah.
Approved, merge and ship. And then, there's good vibes there. There's a good back and forth, and there's governance, and the application engineers aren't blocked. And that's what's important. And I think that I don't see enough people really doing that. Maybe there's a lot of people who are like, yeah, just give them the portal, give them the IDP that allows them to submit the form, and then suddenly they get infrastructure. And I think that's part of it. I think they're just, using Git ends up being my go-to. Like we really, you know,
Yeah.
appreciate that type of workflow.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We have a few comments here by the audience. So and I need to yeah, laugh. I'm laughing reading this. So Tiago is saying infrastructure as code is mostly configuration with a small amount of computation, whereas Pulumi like solutions are complete languages with advanced Turing complete languages, but they are not good at configuration, and that hits the nail. Yeah. And I think so a lot of people try working around the limitations of, just being able to run computations on a limited extent. Yeah, Terramate can help you with that. It's one way. Terragrant can do that too, and other toolings as well. But I think simplicity is the key by the end of the day, right? So if you don't manage to keep your infrastructure code simple and well organized, then you perhaps have more of an organizational issue or an issue in your approach than anything else. And then somebody else here saying that should developers manage infrastructure? The answer is no. My personal take is, and Matt, I'll give it to you after I read the comments here, that I very much think it depends. So in my opinion, what we should care about a lot more are workflows than technology. We keep having those debates, whether to use Terraform or Pulumi or whatnot. But by the end of the day, the business value, I think, is more important than being too strongly opinionated on the actual technology. And both can get you to the same goal with, different invests and, different talent available on the market, different tooling available on the market, etc. So now Jesse says people don't seem to remember how difficult it was to maintain imperative IaC, whether it was SSH in a for loop or later AWS CloudFormation templates. It's not that you can't maintain your infrastructure with imperative code. It is how reusable that code is and how easy it is for others to understand what the why of the code is. And then he says GitOps is really a revolution. And it is. Question for you, Matt. So looking at, looking at all the bazillion different offerings out there on how to automate Terraform, and I know that you are one of the voices that has been saying in the past buy versus build. But looking at this whole GitOps, movement, especially in infrastructure as code. So how do you feel about that? Do you think that, GitOps is sort of the way to automate and provide workflows in IaC, or is it more, do you see more the, clicky kind of ClickOps interfaces? Yeah, would love to learn more.
Yeah. Of course. I think that it's like, much better to automate everything via GitOps, just because you get, I think what it really clicked for me was going through compliance for clients, where we're helping them get through PCI.
Yeah.
And there needs to be a history of, who did what, when, and why. As things change, there's basically change management policies. And when you're practicing GitOps, and GitOps, like your Git repo, the configuration that you're driving there is actually the source of truth, then you get that kind of out of the box. And you already have it as a tool. Git is already going to be a thing that you use. I don't know what the percentage is of people that are using SVN or Mercurial or whatever, but like it's less than, 2% or something, I'm sure. And so you already have it as a tool. Your application engineers and your platform engineers already know it. And it gives you a bunch of very powerful transparency to everyone. So it's just the better way to automate infrastructure, I think. Like, I think that it gives you the ability to say, oh yeah, we created this last week or 6 months ago, and it was Dave over on the SRE team needed to do it because of X, Y, and Z. And I think that the people that are optimizing around that are doing well. I think, Terramate and Terra Team, you two are two of the like up and coming automation tools that I'm like excited about, because it's all very Git and GitHub Action based, and I'm a huge fan of GitHub Actions. And that is fantastic. I think that the Spacelift M0 and Scalar folks are doing good stuff. I wish they had more declarative, like, hey, manage all of your stacks via a declarative CLI, or like a declarative file, instead of it being even Terraform based.
Yeah.
Like, I like managing things through Terraform, but there is a beauty to just being, hey, we have a manifest that actually gives you a way to architect or a way to declare exactly what you want, and you don't need to worry about planning or applying it. Like, it just happens. That's really useful. So, yeah, I don't know. Those are the things that come to mind.
It's you're touching a few interesting points here. So if I think, and I said this before, couple of weeks back on Twitter or LinkedIn or whatnot, I don't remember, but the runner market, the CI/CD market at that point of time, at this point of time, is pretty much commoditized, right? There's a bazillion different choices. You can run and orchestrate Terraform in basically any CI/CD. Then, sort of like the do-it-yourself solutions of this work, where it's like you build stuff around GitHub Actions or GitLab or Bitbucket pipelines. And then they're purpose-built CI/CDs, Spacelift, M0, Scala, and among a few others. And the reason, or one of the main reasons why we started working initially on Terramate, so now Terramate is not in CI/CD, right? But one of the main reasons is that if I look at those platforms and, I'm to sign a significant check to buy yet another CI/CD vendor that I need to provide with access to my cloud accounts and that owns my state in a sensitive environment, that may work for some people, but it just did not work for me. So obviously all of those all of those platforms do a lot more than just this, but and all of them have a solid offering. But at this point, I would also vouch that, the way going forward, and I started a poll on LinkedIn a couple of weeks back, 250 votes or so, 75% of the people said that they built on GitHub Actions, on GitLab, on Bitbucket pipelines, which is sort of contradictory to the, build versus buy. And I'm sure that, the remaining 25% here that prefers to buy, they ran into the corner before and they tried to build. And after 2 years of doing this, they, tossed everything away. And then they just, got so frustrated or something bad happened that they decided to buy a vendor, which you always buy reliability, right? Not only cool features and stuff, but SLAs and availability and
Yeah.
safety. Um, Long story short, I do think that because of the license change, so the license change just accelerates this because now those vendors, in theory, are not able to compete on new Terraform versions anymore. The promise of OpenTofu is to, overcome this. Let's see. I'm bullish on OpenTofu. I like the movement, but I think it's going to be very hard to compete with HashiCorp in the long run.
Yeah,
It's all
they're
about
incumbent.
adoption. Yeah.
Yeah.
So and now because that happens, I personally think that more and more people will tend toward automating in their CI/CD. So to come back to my point, one of the main motivations why we initially actually started Terramate is that we thought, hey, actually all you need is a solid API that helps you invoke this in any CI/CD, and it's part of what Terramate can do. And you already mentioned Terra Team. I actually like their solutions and also the team quite a lot. I think they do, they do quite some good things, and it's impressive to see what they've built. Being a
They're funny
bootstrap
guys.
company, yeah, it's solid for sure. Um, so for us, I think the way that I look at it is CI/CD at this point, yeah, there are some problems to solve. There's different ways of solving those. Terramate is just one of them. But then, I think the issue that, we're trying to tackle is more on the observability, on the visibility, like really understanding at the scale, what kind of infrastructure you manage with infrastructure as code among several repositories. For example, one pattern, and that would be an interesting question for you, is that I see one of our, biggest customers, they just migrated from a mono repository. They split this up because they
Oh,
had literally
interesting.
hundreds of pull requests in there every day, like that kind of
Mhm.
scale. And then
Yeah.
at some point, it gets really hard to see who's actually owning what, even with code owners and stuff. And if you need to click back 5 pages on GitHub Actions to see that latest broken deployment, it becomes a little bit difficult and stuff, which is something that we solve in Terramate Cloud, but that's not the topic here. So they split this up, right? And now basically they distribute the problem on different repositories, which I think it sort of encourage for more self-service and for people to take things more serious, because now that you don't have the centralized place anymore where people run after you and they fix stuff. Um, but it also comes with this whole overhead of, making sure that workflows are streamlined among repositories, settings are in place, yada yada. So it adds this extra layer of complexity. So my question to you is, do you see that organizations typically tend toward using monorepos? Or, do you see more of a pattern whereas, it's team specific or even application specific, that the infrastructure code lives where the actual application code is?
Um, I've seen both. I think that we always encourage mono repos because the scale of what you're talking about, hundreds of pull requests a day or even a week, is not common, right? Like, how many how many engineers do you actually need in an organization to get to that scale? It's, you're looking at 500 to 1,000 plus. And, I say that's not common, but I'm just saying, um, Valerio just commented, Matt, please don't say mono repos. He and I go back and forth on uh, LinkedIn all the time. So that's good stuff. But yeah, uh, what we suggest at least is mono repos because you're not usually hitting that level of scale. There isn't usually that many changes that are going within the teams that we engage with. And I mean, we're talking about, we worked with an enterprise client. We've worked with a number of mid-market clients. We've worked with a lot of startups. So I think that there is something to be said for breaking up at that point when you do get to that scale. But I don't think that that's where folks should start, at least, because you said it. Hey, as soon as you break it up, you now have when you're in a poly repo situation, you now need to manage all those repos to make sure that they're all using, the same practices. You need to make sure that they're all have the same GitHub settings so that you're using whatever type of merge or branch strategy that you're following. You need to, keep versions up to date across all of them. And that stuff is actually a pain in the ass when it comes down to it, because unless you have good tooling and you've put work into managing those things, you can do that really easily. It ends up being that one engineer has to take most of their day to go and update a ton of repos. And yeah, I don't know. We've worked with clients that have had, a poly repo setup where they had 50 plus repositories around just their microservices, and huge nightmare. We ended up getting all of those repositories managed via the GitHub provider, and then it made things a lot easier. But until you get to a certain point like that, there's a lot of pain that goes into it. So but what do I see people do? If they're kind of new to Terraform and maybe they don't have the expertise, a lot of people do go the polyrepo approach and they think, oh yeah, I'll just stick some Terraform here alongside of the application code, and this will be great. We'll just plan and apply it from here, and then they end up working across 10 different repos, a year later, and they're kind of pulling their hair out. And we have a client that's like that. We inherited a Terraform setup, and my team is disgruntled. They get upset about it all the time. So yeah, I don't know. I find it to be there's an obvious solution, and I think that other people go the opposite way. So
Yeah. It's a good point. There's an obvious solution. And again, I think, we keep talking about the same problems over and over again, man. It's like CI/CD. This is solved problem right now. And yeah, there's different apply strategies, there's different ways of locking things and making things more secure. But by the end of the day, it's such an opinionated philosophical question to debate all of this. And then by the end of the day, we stop innovating and,
yeah.
we stop caring about what really matters. So, one thing um, that I was, that I'm very close to right now is this whole topic of generative AI, right? Um, and what I was, what was really interesting and sort of an aha moment for me is that just a year ago, I think it was last year, or 2 years ago even, no, last year at KubeCon, um, something like that. I don't remember. People were so negative about applying and using Gen AI with infrastructure or infrastructure as code specifically. And then again, I keep using, I keep using my LinkedIn to start polls and see how folks feel about it. And of course, there's some sort of a bias, to it because the audience that I have on LinkedIn is probably pretty practitioner heavy, like a lot of people that build, a lot of people that are really hands-on to the code, and maybe also people that like to build. But the sentiment changed so much from this is all bullshit to actually I'm willing to explore this. So from what I see is the only company that has really, stepped into this category and it's really trying to provide value to the customers. Pulumni AI, which I've been checking out, and it's still sort of like 65% of the results are okay and everything else is crap, but it sort of gives you a shortcut to get to somewhere. So, is this something that you guys look at specifically, whether it's using Copilot in your development workflows or, even more advanced use cases, such as generating end-to-end architectures, resource declarations, whatnot?
Yeah. Um, we're big fans of Copilot. I think that, I've had multiple members of my team say this would have been such a pain in the ass to write, except Copilot just kind of auto-filled a bunch of the junk that I already knew I needed. Um, you know, Using a new module, open source module, and being able to just generate all the variables that, you're likely to use is like a really nice thing that Copilot can do for you. But do we use any Gen AI tools? I haven't heard anyone on my team do it. I definitely don't do it. I think that uh, a lot, so much of what I think about in terms of infrastructure as code, but just generally about software is that let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's not like go out and build something ourselves because it's very likely that somebody already did that. And the nice thing about Terraform, kind of what we were talking about earlier, is that there's this awesome community of people who are publishing open source infrastructure code and maintaining it and versioning it correctly. And you can go out and search for that thing that you're about to deploy and get that. And you're just consuming it and configuring it the way that you need. Um, the thing I don't like about Gen AI for infrastructure code is that it seems to just spit out a bunch of resources for you. And then, hey, look, now you have 1,000 lines of Terraform that you need to manage. And that's kind of in the long term feels like it's a short-sighted thing. Yes, you're going to be able to, get that new resource deployed, but if you had just done a little bit of research, you could have found a very similar amount of code that was open source, and you could have consumed that, and then upgrading it, getting new features, getting bug fixes is likely just a version bump and not a, oh, now I need to go back and read through all of this, all these different resources, understand how it's all working, and then make the fix myself. So the answer to your question is no, not really. Like we don't use Gen AI. I'm I'm more excited about tools that are I think that there will be a point where it could be useful where you can say, hey, we have like it needs a little bit of training data where you can tell it I want to use these set of modules, or I want you to follow the practices that are already in this existing repo. And once it gets there, I think that there will be um, better benefits, but I haven't seen that yet today. And I think that we might not be looking closely enough because I'm sure somebody's thinking about that problem, but I just haven't seen it. So, uh, Terramate, I know you guys just added Gen AI into the CLI, and I definitely want to check that out. And if you haven't done that already, if you haven't given it the ability to like get prompted on, do you want to use a particular module library? I think that would be an interesting way to think about the problem.
Yeah. Um, Lots of good feedback in there. Thank you so much. So we haven't built it yet. We're building it.
Oh, okay.
Um, and you know, the way that I look at it is that at this point, the technology may not be mature enough to provide a significant impact now, right? Similarly to when you bought your first iPhone, it was amazing back then, but it was completely broken.
Yeah, it's the
Um,
Vision One, the Vision Pro One, version one. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I unfortunately didn't have the $3,500 spare money. Otherwise, I would wear one by now for sure. And also, it's not yet available in the European market as far as I'm aware of.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Interesting.
but regarding AI and Gen AI, so the reason why we started to so heavily invest into that direction is because I think times have changed and the the results that I'm seeing have changed so well too that I'm getting to a point where the data is more convincing. So to get more into what you said, yes, using a bunch of, pre-trained generative AI models, and this models available, Salesforce, Cogent, OpenAI, Google, Code, Python, Gemini Pro, whatnot. The results are questionable. Um, you, you need to get to somewhat of a better result the more specific you get by feeding the prompt, with by asking to actually for more accurate results. So an example here is that, oh, in Terramate we have Terramate code generation, right? So this is no magic, in a sense of we don't use GenAI there yet. We use the Terramate code generation to, keep your stacks dry, to generate really Terraform backend and provider configuration, as native files, and I think we're particularly good doing that. So now that means if I use an LLM model to generate code inside a stack, I don't want to repeat those declarations again, right? And it's just some basic things, but like the more you teach the prompt to actually get to the result that you want in the sense of being more specific, like explaining a 5-year-old what you actually want,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
even more so what you don't want. That's actually the trick. The better it gets. But having said that, the results are still not amazing.
Yeah.
But if you can feed data, uh, organizational IaC data, like how do you use IaC in your organization? What are the models you use? What is the compliance frameworks that you use, etc. Introduce models, which by now you can do, which is, it's commoditized. There's APIs that allow you to go through this and extract some sort of value. Then the results are actually a lot more promising. And now that you have OpenAI functions, for example, that allow you to get more context to the actual computation, ask some of your APIs to provide more data, metadata, or whatnot, the results actually look quite promising. And the way that I look at it is, yeah, again, it may not be, we may, it may take another couple of years to get there, but I'm convinced that at this point that it will have a big impact on the industry. So now, does it mean that you won't write any infrastructure code anymore? No, of course not. But does that mean that in 2 years, now thinking coming from the other side, does it mean that in two years nobody needs to read in Terraform plan anymore? For sure. And that's the second use case that we look at. So yeah, we look in the code generation, and I think the code generation is a lot more experimenting, bootstrapping quick, maybe getting to results quicker. Whereas honestly, Copilot does an amazing job. I'm surprised how good it is. Meanwhile, like I write a resource declaration and it generates all the variables for me and stuff. It's amazing. I would pay them $500 a year. Anyways, hope they don't listen to that.
Yeah.
But if you look at more this, oh, explain to me what sort of infrastructure is managed in this Terramate stack. And now, is that sane and secure? And now, please explain to me what is the difference between stack A and stack 2? And how can I resolve those? Explain this Terraform plan file for me. Those are the use cases to sum up this monologue. Obviously, I like monologues that are a lot more feasible, and the results are actually quite insane. So I think this is where we try to innovate more, specifically around Terraform and OpenTofu to provide value to our users. And what I'm surprised to see is that actually, at least I'm not aware of that, but nobody else does that. Everybody takes care of CI/CD. Everybody takes care of orchestration. There's 100 different open source solutions to Terraform Cloud. Like people build entire businesses up on that, but nobody's really looking at AI. And the question that I have is it just us being, so opinionated as engineers that we don't want to open up to this new technology, or is it still so early that we haven't seen the use cases? Yeah, I guess
Yeah.
that's.
There's a couple things in what you said that I want to like touch on. Like one, hey, do we need to like look at plans? Will AI be able to like tell us that we're not going to have to review that plan? It's good. That gets exciting, right? Because, when you look at like I think about we write OPA policies for that type of stuff a lot of the
Yeah.
time, so that we write some policy as code that says, hey, this gets auto approved unless this thing is changed. And that policy as code is really stupid simple. It would be really nice to just be able to like describe the stack and say, hey, I only want to apply this automatically if, if this is happening. Otherwise, yeah, give me a confirmation, send me a, an approval prompt in Slack. So I really like that direction, and you're building it into the Terramate Cloud tool, so it'll be exciting to see like what you do there. The other thing that I thought of is that I think that I definitely am on board with what you're saying, that hey, 2 years from now, a year from now, we'll have much better Gen AI around infrastructure as code. It's really not that it's going to get solved, right? Um, and that gets exciting because uh, I don't think that, yeah, the hard problems aren't in actually describing the infrastructure that you want. It's more the orchestration. And that is when you're dealing with, a large infrastructure and this idea of, hey, we want small root modules, we want, small blast radius, small plan and apply times. We, just end up in the orchestration problem game. And I feel like if we could just, have more of it be focused on that orchestration problem, like our issues being more in that realm, then there'd be a lot of cool innovation that could come out of it. So I'm looking forward to that. And it's yeah, I would just agree that it's coming. I haven't seen it. That's all I was saying. And I'll be looking forward to the day that I
Yeah.
can Terramate CLI, generate all the right things.
I'll get
Yeah,
you. I'll get you on the beta list,
sounds great.
or more the alpha list. No, but it's so interesting to, and then I think we can sum up, soon. But it's so interesting to see how we actually repeat the same pattern over and over again. And a use case that you just, elaborated on, like, do I really want every single PR in my organization to be reviewed if I can automate that? Like, it costs so much time, and it also so much time people looking at this, and then also lead time to changes until, a bad impact on dollar metrics, until this is rolled out. And dude, I can tell you, like, almost no organization out there is automating this.
Yeah,
Almost none.
yeah. Um,
So it's just
It'll be interesting.
there's a lot of room to improve, I think, with simple steps.
Yeah, it's all going to be moving fast. That's the crazy thing about AI, is that yeah, we're at this like early adoption phase. There's I think that some of the hype, at least I've heard people get over the hype a little bit now, but like uh I think that there will be some interesting things that come out of it once some of that hype is actually diminished, and people are their solutions come to life. So it'll be cool.
Yeah. And I'll keep you posted. And dude, was great as always, man. I always enjoy talking to you.
Yeah,
It's
same, man.
always that I learn a lot, and the conversation is heads up. And thank you so much for joining. I hope to get you on the office hour soon again. Maybe we can do. I'd love to actually give you an in detail demo of Terramate and have your honest feedback. Maybe we can do this in a live stream too and compare it to somewhat, TerraGrant. Even though there's no Terramate integration for Terramate for TerraGrant coming, so you can like seamlessly integrate this in existing TerraGrant projects. But enough, sidekicks, marketing messages here. Thanks a lot, man. Was great talking to you, and thanks for taking the time. And good luck with your business
Yeah,
too.
yeah. Thanks, man. Always happy to chat. It is always learn something new, and yeah, appreciate y'all.
All right, and then
Talk
to
soon.
everybody else, thanks for joining too. We'll be back in 2 weeks from now on, and yeah, we'll make sure that the recording is available in maybe at latest tomorrow. And wishing all of ya happy Valentine's Day. Bye bye.